The pound is back up again, so everything's fine. My name's Mike Cashman. If you like my stuff, please subscribe to the channel, buy the books and the music, invite me to talk at your meetings. The title of this video, like a number of others, is based on things that people have said to me. So, as in this case, the pound is back up again, so everything's fine. I'm going to talk about exchange rates. And I'm going to talk about exchange rates over the last 6 years. And the reason for that is that, if you're watching this, I would encourage you not to be distracted by the sensationalist newspaper headlines. Pound soars on wake of enthusiasm. Pound crashes after, so, we've just now had pound crashes after investors lose confidence in Britain following Conservative Party conference. Generally, those headlines that talk about the pound soaring or the pound crashing are talking about quite a small change. Now, currency traders may take account of that, may wonder whether it's the start of something bigger. But we're not talking generally about massive changes. There have been some massive changes, and let's look at them. So, if we want to see what the pound has done, then we should be looking at where change has been significant. Now, a lot of the focus in, what happened to the pound as a result of Brexit is on what happened on the night of June the 23rd. During the course of the, after the polls closed, a little while after Nigel Farage conceded the referendum, the pound shot up. He then changed his mind. The pound crashed. And maybe he made some money in the meantime. We don't know. But there was a significant change on June the 23rd. I was aware of the impact of all of this, of the referendum and the likely result and so on, from some months before that. Now, I tend to check the exchange rates every day in the job that I was doing then, and that I've done from time to time since then, been hauled out of retirement to help with international development grants. And at the time, we were in the stage with the Ebola pandemic of recovery from the pandemic. This was earlier in 2016. So at the end of February, for example, I was watching the news carefully because I was also due to receive, on behalf of the charity that I worked for, a grant, or a first instalment of a grant from Department for International Development of £2.5 million to help with recovery of the economy in Sierra Leone. Now, don't respond to this video with comments on whether you think international aid is a good idea or not. I can make the point that if you are looking at it from a purely local point of view, then the UK government probably didn't want the Sierra Leone economy to completely crash and leave lots of destitute people seeking their fortunes elsewhere, e.g. in Europe. But the point is, what happened to the exchange rate? This is nothing to do with international development, really. The fact that I was looking at how £2.5 million could be spent overseas, and the fact that for me it was an international development, is irrelevant. Anybody with pounds wanting to use them overseas was potentially in a similar situation. Now, it was the end of February when I got that instalment and was able to start deploying it. And just about that time, Boris Johnson was writing his 2 articles and trying to decide which way he would come down, which horse he would back. Was some story that he bitterly regrets taking the Brexit path, and that would be understandable. But anyway, fact of the matter is that he did declare for Brexit. The pound took quite a drop at that particular time, the end of February. It was about 2%. I said earlier that wasn't massive, but when you've got £2.5 million that you're hoping to use, then that is significant in terms of how much less you can do for the beneficiary communities that you're aiming to assist. And as I say, same factor would apply to anybody using pounds overseas. So it's not just what happened on June the 23rd. What we need to look at is the overall impact of the Brexit initiative. Now, what I've done is I've got a couple of graphs from www.xe.com of the pound against the dollar and the pound against the euro. You know, if it's just the pound against the dollar, then the pound sliding might be because the dollar was getting particularly strong. So that's why I've done them against those two major currencies. And where I've gone back to is just before the 2015 election, because the point at which David Cameron got an overall majority, which was quite a surprise, that was the point at which people knew that that manifesto pledge of holding a referendum on EC membership was now going to be enacted at some point during the next Parliament. If he didn't have an overall majority, then he wouldn't have been able to push that through. And I'm not saying it had an immediate impact, but it just gives a time frame of early May 2015 to now that we can look at. I've got the graphs on paper here, but I'll also put them on the screen. So if we look at US dollars, then just before that May 2015 election, pound was trading at 1.51457 to the dollar. It's not the highest it got to higher than that. I remember it being 1.55, but for much of that Ebola action, we were working on a basis of 1.52. And you can see the massive crash June the 23rd, sort of falling off a cliff crash, and up and down since then, and latest with a bit of a drop after the Conservative Party conference, if that's a significant thing, to 1.36396. So 1.51 to 1.36, dropping about 0.15, so dropping about 10% of its earlier value. If we look at the pound to euro chart, then before the election it was at 1.35407, and latest rate 1.17836. Again, dropped there about 0.18 euros, 18 cents, a little bit less than that, 17.5, and that's rather more than 10%. That is a significant devaluation of a currency. Harold Wilson, I recall, in the 1960s, got into big trouble for a devaluation of 14%, pound going from $2.8 to $2.4. People saying, oh, cent is worth a penny now. But this is a similar level of effect, meaning that your pounds are worth less, certainly against the dollar and the euro, and that tends to mean against everything else. Now, of course, there's lots of other things going on during that time. Is this all down to Brexit? Certainly, it's certainly not. It's not all down to Brexit. But the best way that you could say, well, let's see how much of that overall effect, within all these ups and downs and waves and so on over the years, how much of that overall effect is down to Brexit? Well, even if we look just at the night of June the 23rd, so the overnight after the referendum, as the result started to become clear and then was declared, we can see that falling off a cliff crash, and in fact that's a crash of about 10% at that point. I mean, in the subsequent weeks it went down rather further, and that probably was also to do with Brexit. But even if we just take that particular night, we've got a crash of 10% at that point. And I remember saying, because a senior colleague asked me for my opinion on whether this would be recovered, and I said I think this will be a permanent damage to the value of sterling. Well, it's 5 years on, and that's what it's proved to be. That 10% crash that night has turned out to be the long-term effect over those 6 years of the effect, well, it has turned out to be what has happened to our currency in terms of its reducing value around the world, which is obviously people's estimates of the prospects for the UK economy. So if a pro-Brexit person says, you know, looking at the last few weeks graph of the exchange rate and the newspaper headlines, oh, the pound is up again, so that problem is solved. No, I'm sorry. You get to a point where the pound is above 150 in terms of dollars, above 135 in terms of euros. Yes, if that happens, then the losses of Brexit have been recovered. But if not, don't imagine that the damage has been undone. I'm Mike Cashman. Please subscribe to the channel.